Morning. Good. Well, hey, how you like the new seating arrangements? A little bit different? That's a little bit different. So I just switched it up a little bit. Just figured I'd play with your minds this week. So for those of you who join us by means of video, we switched the chairs up a little bit. So people are feeling like I'm sitting somewhere I don't normally sit, or it's a different view. So we'll try to make that transition as comfortable as possible. We just thought we'd try this for a few weeks or so during the summer to see how that goes. I wanted to welcome a couple of guests here today. In our children's program was called Kids Spring. That's our children's program that goes from, it actually starts at little, like that size right there, whatever it's like brand new babies all the way up to fifth graders. And when they graduate from fifth grade, move up to sixth grade, they transition and move into what we call H2O Youth, our youth group program. And so we have a couple of young people today who are transitioning. This is their first, I think it's about their first week in this worship service because they have graduated out of the kids program. So I want to, if they would stand up, Jaden and Lily, if they'll stand up, give them a round of applause. So there you go. So we want to welcome you to the grown-up worship. So you get to hear all the conversations now. So see how that goes. I don't know if it's really that much grown-up because if you look around you, well, they look grown up to you, but to me, I've seen them before. I'm not sure all you guys are grown up yet or not. Anyway, I want to ask you a question. How many of you have ever heard of the phrase, falling on deaf ears? Falling on deaf ears. Now, I need somebody, shout out some responses, and I'll try to get as many. What does falling on deaf ears mean to you? Not listening, not hearing, ignoring what? Not paying attention, what my husband does, what my wife does, what my children do. Going in one ear and out the other, like there's nothing to stop it. Selective hearing. One of the things that they said in the definition was it's being ignored or disregarded. As in, any advice that we give them about remodeling seems to fall on deaf ears. Like they ask somebody about remodeling the house and it falls on deaf ears. And what it says is that this expression, that this is the dictionary says this, that this expression of falling on deaf ears transfers physical inability. So it says you physically can't hear with someone who you do not want to listen to. Okay, so that goes back to that selective hearing. But I want to ask you, what are some of the reasons that a person might ignore or disregard advice given to them? What is a reason why your words might be falling on deaf ears? My mind's made up. My mind's made up, don't bore me with the facts. What's another reason? Bad advice. Rebellious. They think you're nagging. What else? They think they're already. We're talking about they a lot, aren't we? They we ain't talking about we are like that. No way. But so let's say that you were going to, I don't know. Let's say you're going to build a house. Okay, you're going to build a house, right? And you go and you get. What's the first stage of building a house? Some of you got houses. What would be the first stage? Foundation, what? Construction, the loan. Somebody's talking about the place, the loan, the building. You probably, if you're going to build your dream house, would probably get an architect or somebody that knows something about designing it, because there's all those things called the blueprints that has the electrical, has the plumbing, has all the different things and all that stuff. So you're going to get somebody to design what you want, right? So let's say you go and you hire the expert on building a house. And the expert tells you, here's the designs, he listens to what you say, or she listens to what you say, and you give them all this, and do you want your outlets here, and what kind of finishing would you want? And you give them all this information, how many bedrooms, how many baths, whether it's upstairs, down. You give them all this information, and they lay out and design this house, and then they begin to tell you about the codes, wherever you're going to place this home or whatever. Like if you're building in a flood zone, then there's certain specifications you got to do. If you're building in the city limits, it's one thing. If you're building in the country, it might be something different. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you all, don't let your septic system drain into a 55-gallon drum. I know that used to be done a long time ago. That's not the way to do it now, okay? So they give you all these things and all. What would be a reason that you would ignore the advice of your architect or your planner or your designer? It costs too much money. Cost. Doesn't really understand what I want. Why else would you ignore them? May not trust him or her. Here's some things that I've written down for reasons that you might ignore or disregard the advice they give you. One is you don't know them well enough. They're not trustworthy. Doesn't matter how much advice they give you, if it's not trustworthy, you're not going to take. What if they're not honest? Are you going to take advice from a crook? How are you going to know that? Well, maybe their reputation. Maybe you can talk to some other people and you know whether they're dishonest or not. Right? What about if they have a bad reputation? If some of the houses they built before or something has some issues, would you take advice from that person who's like, oh, I'm just going to try to help you out? What about if their advice is self-seeking advice? And what I mean by that, they're giving you advice to add all these things onto your home, but it's just going to pad their wallet. You understand what I'm saying? And so it's about them. We're going to sell you this accessory. We're going to sell you this or whatever. What about if it goes against your desires? If that expert gives you an opinion and it goes against what you want, you wouldn't do that. What if it's too hard or too costly or it's too uncomfortable? This is going to take you 6 months to do this. Hey, I don't want to wait 6 months. I need my house built today. Or, hey, you got to go through the proper coding to do this with the city. I'm going to skip that process. I'm going to go on and do it this way. So there's all kinds of reasons that you might disregard them. But what if the person was trustworthy, honest, loyal, thrifty, clean? I could go on and give you the Boy Scouts 12 points. But what if it had a good reputation? And what if that person knew you? They knew you, knew your family, knew all about you, knew about this dream you had of building this house and doing this thing, and they knew all about you, and they gave you some advice. Why would you not take that person's advice? And what if you say, I'm going to pay my friend who knows me. I'm going to pay a cost. I'm going to pay money or whatever, or you're going to do a side job, or you're going to switch off work. Why would you not take their advice? Can somebody tell me that? Why would it be like what they tell you is falling on deaf ears with you? Anybody? Huh? My mind's made up. Which, somebody said something here. What did they say? You don't really want to do it. See, I would put those two together and say, we think that we know better than the expert. How many of you have been in that situation before where somebody tells you something, like a doctor, and tells you about how to take your medicine and when to take your medicine, and you, of course, know more than the doctor. Even with your limited knowledge of prescriptions and drugs and the effects they have, I know more, so we don't take that. I worked in a textile industry before, and we hired consultants several times over. Consultants to come in and study the company, to listen to all the people, and give us their opinion on how to do certain things, to market a product, to do financial things, to improve our financial situations, and one time to even try to save us out of, we hired a consultant and paid a lot of money to help us come out of bankruptcy, because that particular company went in bankruptcy at one time. And then they give us this advice, and we pay for this advice. And then we say this: no matter how much you know about everything out there, you really don't know us. All that expertise and all that knowledge that you have about all of those things out there from all over, and you come here and we're paying you money, and we claimed it, we've checked your background, and we know you're a great resource, but we think we know better. And what happened was that same company went through a second bankruptcy, and it's ended up closed after we left, because we wouldn't take the advice of those, because we thought we knew better. And I think that's an issue that many of us have sometimes when it comes to advice. We think that we know better than others. We think that we know better than the experts. Now let me tell you while I'm going on with this. We're trying to talk about a parable today. A parable that Jesus gave his disciples. A parable or illustration that has some deep meaning to it about being a disciple, about what it was to be a disciple, to follow Jesus, because many of us, that's what we're trying to do. Some of you may be here and you're just trying to kick the tires and figure out, I'm just trying to find a place to find a home or find people I can talk to. But what we believe is, from our understanding of what Jesus is that everybody is a disciple in the process of becoming a true disciple of Jesus. There's somewhere on this continuum of progressing as a disciple. And so Jesus had a group of people that he was telling things to. He was helping them to understand the scriptures that they had at that time. He was helping them to understand how to live and how to go through their lives and try to take the scriptures and apply them to their life. And these people were following him. And I guess you would say that if you were in a congregation like this, that the people that were the closest to him wasn't his deacons or his elders, it was his disciples. They were the closest ones to him. They didn't go back there to the back. They just sort of were close to Jesus so they could really get him. He didn't have microphone systems. They didn't have amplification. So he would be talking, and he'd be talking to his close ones there. But there was a lot of other people overhearing or trying to get closer and hear. And they were all in these various stages of being a disciple. And one day Jesus says to them, after a while of talking to them, after a period of time of telling them some things, he says this to them in verse 46 of Luke 6. He says, "Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say?" So I just want to let you know this is going to set up the whole discussion we're going to have today. Jesus, in his day and time, had a problem, or it seems like a problem, or he had a question, or it raised a question in his mind. He's like, "Why do you call me Lord, Lord, but you don't do what I say? Why are you following me? Why are you around me? Why are you coming close to me? Why are you coming to get my advice? Why are you talking to me? Why are you listening to me? Why are you around me if you're not going to do what I say?" For Jesus, maybe that's confusing. Maybe as being the Son of God come from heaven to earth, he's used to seeing all of creation in heaven doing what his Father says. He can't understand this disconnect of why people won't do or what he's saying. But yet they'll call him Lord. You call me Lord, Lord, but you don't do what I say. You identify me as your Lord, but I got a question. Is it just because you can say the words Lord, Lord so others can hear you? Are you doing this? Are you just coming around me? Now, he didn't say this. I'm just inferring this. Are you just coming around me and calling me Lord just so she can hear it or they can hear it and then they can feel better about you? Are you trying to build your rep up by hanging around me calling me Lord? Or maybe you're not just doing that. Maybe you just need yourself to feel better. So maybe you're just saying the words Lord, Lord so you will feel better about yourself, but you have no intentions of doing what I say. And so he's got this dilemma going on, because I think what Jesus anticipates or what he assumes from this when people behave like this is, when you call me Lord, when you say Lord, Lord, you're really saying you're my servant. And then if I say anything to you, it's not a suggestion. If you're my servant, it's a command. And so when you don't do what I'm asking, you disobey me. When you don't do what I say. When you don't do what I say, you're disrespecting me. And when you don't do what I say, you're really dishonoring. Now, I don't think that anybody in this room who is on their path of becoming a mature disciple of Jesus Christ really wants to disobey, disrespect, or dishonor Jesus or God. And I don't think those people in that area that he was talking to for this particular moment wanted to do it either. Maybe they were doing it unconsciously. Maybe they just didn't put enough thought into it. And so he raises this question. He raises the issue. He raises up the elephant in the room. Or at least it's an elephant to him. They seem to be riding on the elephant, don't realize what's underneath them. He says, "Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and you don't do what I say?" So then he continues in this parable. He tells them this story. He says, "As for everyone who comes to me and hears my word and hears my words and puts them into practice, I will show you what they are like. So he's going to give us this example. He's going to show us this. They are like a man building a house who dug down deep, laid the foundation on rock, and when the flood came, the torrent struck the house, but could not shake it, because it was well built. But the one who hears my words and does not put them into practice is like a man who built a house on the ground without a foundation. The moment the torrent struck the ground, or struck that house, it collapsed, and its destruction was, what's that word up there? One more time. What's that word? Its destruction was complete. So I want you to write this down now. Here's the first thing I want you to do, and Jody or somebody will give you some ink pens if you don't have those. Now, those message notes have empty spots in there for you to write this down. This is something that you will be tested on. Well, I don't know how to get you to write it down. I mean, usually if you say that in a class, doesn't that mean, will we see that? Yes, you will see this again. Does everybody understand that statement? You will see this again. So if you need a message notes, raise your hand, or if you need a pen, raise your hand, and then here we go. So 3 things to being a disciple of Jesus. 3 things I think that are key to being a disciple of Jesus when we call him Lord, Lord. Number 1, who comes to me? He says, for everyone who comes to me. So the first thing that you have to do to be able to live into this part of being a servant or being a disciple of Jesus is we've got to come to who? Jesus. That doesn't mean come to Oprah, Dr. Phil. It doesn't mean even go to President Trump. It just means we got to come to Jesus. Okay? That's number 1. So what's number 1? How many of y'all ever heard that phrase? We're going to have a come to Jesus meeting. All the time. How many parents have ever used that with their kids? Or how many coaches have ever used that with their players? Or how many band directors have ever used it with their people in their band? We're going to have a come to Jesus meeting. That always gives a negative thing, but it's like, I want to just say, we just need to come to Jesus as number 1, okay? Number 2, based on this, he said, is for everyone who comes to me, and number 2 is what? Hears my words. Write that down. Number 2 is hear my words. So it's not just about showing up, it's about listening, okay? Many people, well, let me back up a minute. When it says come to Jesus, I'm just going to tell you this. It doesn't say come to church. Now, you're hearing me say that. And obviously, a lot of other people have heard this or believe this because they aren't here today. And they're not in other churches. They believe I don't have to come to church to come to Jesus. But it is a known fact that Jesus is in many of the churches. He's in the people that represented in the churches. But I'm going to tell you this. If you come to a church and you can't find Jesus, you need to leave. Because that ain't a church. It's not a church of Jesus Christ. I don't care what denomination is. I don't care what signia is on the outside. I don't care how much water they splash on you, immerse you, or throw on you. I don't care about that. I don't care about any of that. If you can't see or find Jesus in a church or the people of the church, you need to walk. You need to walk. You need to get somewhere else and find that place. And I mean that for here too. If you can't see it in the people, you can't sense it in the presence of the people, you can't sense it in what's going on, you need to leave, because it doesn't say come to church because I've always gone there. It doesn't say come to church because my family founded this church. It doesn't say come to church because I do these other things in that. It says come to me. Come to Jesus. Now, if you're here, you've done number 1. Number 2 is listen. Hear my words. Now, here's the other thing I want to say to you. Hearing the words of Jesus, hearing the words of God, hearing the words aren't just in a pulpit setting or when somebody's preaching from a pulpit. Hearing the words of God could be in your devotional time. Hearing the words of God could be when you read your own Bible or you read somebody else's Bible or you read a scripture, you begin to hear what God says. He speaks to us through our prayer life. Understand, we need to be in prayer to hear from God. We need to be in the Word. So those are 2 known ways that we can hear from God. We can hear from other believers as they begin to wrestle with the Word of what God's saying, and we begin to hear it. So number 1 is what? You've got to come to Jesus. Number 2 is hear my words or hear Jesus' words. And the third one is put them into practice. Now, I'm not telling you something that's not in these scriptures. Can you pull up verse 47, slide 4? All right, you just tell me. This is the scriptures. As for everyone who what? Comes to me. What's the second one? Here's my words. Puts them into practice. And see those ands? That means number 1, number 2, and number 3. Put them into practice. I will show you what they're like. So he's about to show us somebody who's doing all 3 of these things. Now, I just want to throw this out to you. Which one of those 3 things? What's number 1? What's number 2? What's number 3? Which one's the easiest to do? Huh? Come to Jesus? Which one's the hardest to do? So do you think they're in order? They're in order from easiest to hardest. Where do most people tap out at? You understand what tap out? That means that's the MMA or mixed martial arts or, whatever you watch and, they wrestle and you just tap out because I can't take it anymore. Where do they usually, is it number 1? Some tap out at number 1. Some tap out at number 2. Where do most people tap out? Number 3. So I'm wondering if, now I'm just going to get down here and talk to you like this for a minute. Who's he talking to when he's saying this? All of them that's gathered there. How did they get there? They came to him. Who are they hearing? What Jesus is saying. They're doing 1 and 2 right there. And now he's about to talk to them about number 3. You know where number 3's done? When you walk out the door. When you go back home. When you go back to school, when you go back to work, when you go back to that family that just doesn't treat you like family, when you go back to those situations, that's where this stuff is applicable. And Jesus is like, hey, you're here, you're listening, and you're calling me Lord. But why don't you do what I say? Obviously, this isn't the first time, is it? It's the second, third, fourth, fifth. I don't know how many times, but he's recognized who's coming and who's seeing and who's listening and then who's doing or not doing. And so he said, I'm going to show you what it's like. So here comes the illustration. He says, they are like a man building a house. So the people who do all 3 things. Everybody got it? The people who do all 3 things. What are the 3 things? Come to Jesus. Okay, come to Jesus, hear what he says, and put it into practice. Here's what they look like. They are like a man building a house who dug down deep and laid the foundational rock. When a flood came, the torrent struck, and that house could not shake it because it was well built. So this house is what? Well built. The floods couldn't do it. When a flood came, the torrent struck the house, it could not shake it. So here's what I want to understand about this. I want you to understand. Number 1, he's telling a story. First part of the story, a man wants to build a house, correct? Let's assume that a house is a life. A man or a woman, a couple, a family, an individual, whatever, wants to build a good life. And they want to build this life and they want to live in this life. They want to have a life that has meaning and matters, but can't be shaken, no matter what. And so they want to build a house, so they go to build a house. And then it says, who dug down deep and laid a foundation on the rock. So here's the question that I'm going to ask you to cause you to think. Why would they build down till they hit rock? Is that the average thing that an average person knows? No. Who would know something like that? Who would know that you need to build down and get onto the rock? An architect or somebody who has been there, done that. Somebody who's built a house and it might not have survived the flood. You understand? And they tell you in their hindsight, boy, I wish I would have dug down and I would have put that house on the foundation. I wish I know now. I wish I knew then what I know now. And Jesus is trying to tell them what you need to know now, because now is now. You keep thinking I need to know way back then what to do. I'm telling you this is what you need to do right now. So they dug down deep. So the first thing they want to do is build a house, right? They want to build a life. So where do you want to build? What's the number one thing of selling a house? Location, location, location. So you have to choose where you want to build it. He doesn't say that you have to build it in the dry area, in the wet area. It doesn't matter if you build in the mountains or you build in the valley. He doesn't say where. You just need to build a house. The where is not important. He didn't say don't build close to the water, don't build close to this. He never even said, we don't even know where this is. It doesn't matter where you build your life at. It doesn't matter whether you build your life here or there. You pick your location. But then here's what it says. Dig down deep. Now tell me about digging down deep. What does that mean? Does anybody know what digging down is? Has anybody ever dug with a shovel?
Hard work.
Hard work. Tell me some more. You're going to dig down till when? When are we going to dig down to? Y'all going to have to shout out louder. When are we going to dig down? How far are we going to dig down? Till we hit the rock. What if we hit a large stone? Keep digging? So how would you know? So if my house is going to be a 15 by 15 house and I dig down and I find a rock that's like 6 by 6 on size, then I know it's not only part of my house is on the foundation, on a rock. I got to move that rock and keep going until I get what? A rock that is the size of the life that I'm building. Right? Of the house I'm building. It wants to be on that. So how far do you dig? Till you hit the rock. How long will that take? How do you know? How will you know how long it takes? You'll know when. When you hit the rock. Is that right? Is that when you'll know? How much is it going to cost you? How much time is it going to take? And that's where most people tap out. Because I don't know how much time it's going to take. I don't know how much it's going to cost me. Listen, let me tell you, it requires a lot of work. It requires a lot of faith that you're going to hit the rock. You with me? And I'll tell you this is the hardest one. It means you can't live in your house. And you can't even start building until you get there. It means we got to be patient. And we got to persevere. And see, a lot of people can't do that. Because we want it now. And then he goes on and say, once they hit this bedrock, this rock, they attach the foundation to the rock. The foundation is the rock. You understand what I'm saying? So they're connected to it. And then they build the house, right? And then the waters come. The flood comes. And it doesn't say just flood. Flood means a lot of waters, but it says a torrent. A torrent means like fast-moving water. You watch it in Haiti, and you watch some of these others with landslides, and you watch these others where floods. You watch a tsunami come in, and you see it. It looks like from a helicopter like a flood. But when you get down there close to the cameras and you see an automobile, 2 or 3 ton automobile just go by at 40 miles an hour, and the only thing that's moving is water. And it says this is going to hit the house. And it says that when that happens, when the flood comes, no matter how powerful the water, the house can't be shaken. Right? So then he describes the one who doesn't do this. He says, but the one who hears my word, now I just want to say this, there's an assumption you already came to me. Or you picked up the Bible and you read it. You understand? So number 1 was what? Come to Jesus. Number 2 was hear my word. Number 3 was put them in action. So he doesn't say come to me. He's like, you already come to me. You've already picked up the Bible. You've already started praying. You've already been praying. You're reading the Bible. You've done the coming to. And now you hear my words. But you don't put them to practice. So you do 1 and 2, but you don't do 3. And does not put them in practice is like a man who builds a house on the ground without a foundation. The moment the torrent struck that house, it collapsed, and its destruction was, and we said that word earlier, its destruction was complete. It's gone. Now this person wanted a house. This person wanted a house and wanted a life, and so it went to the architect, and it's looking for something to help them, guide them in building, and they picked a location. And it might have been a different location. It could have been side by side by the one that was there. And as they built this location, or built on this location, they decide, I don't want to dig down. Now again, somebody had told the other one, or someone had heard, you need to dig down to the foundation. But this one must have heard but chose. Now there's two options. They must have heard or they never heard. They must have heard and ignored or they never heard. Now you in this room can't say you haven't heard. Those who've come to Jesus and those who listen to Jesus can't say, well, I didn't know that. Can't say it. So it's a choice. So they choose. And that maybe the reason they chose to do this is it's easier. It's less work. It's quicker. I can enjoy my home sooner. Whatever the reason is, it really doesn't matter what the reason is, they don't dig. And so you hear the hammer and you hear the nails and you hear the saws going. Over here on this house and on this house you hear choo, choo, choo. And this has nothing to do because you're like, that's not the sound of building. The sound of building is hammer and nails and saws and lumber dropping. And over here you just hear a shovel. Choo, choo, choo. But this one here builds his house and he moves into his house. And everything's fine, everything looks good. Until what? Flood comes. And as soon as it hits, what happens? House moves. House is complete. The man or the woman's life falls apart. The things you got to understand, they both built a house. They both had someone to explain to them about the bedrock. One chose not to. And the waters came. See, here's what you need to understand. The waters always come in our life. May look like water, it may not look like water to you, but it's always going to come. There's always going to be stuff happen in your life. There's going to be things that come that, depending on where you are with your relationship with Jesus, have you just been coming to Him? Have you been listening to Him? Or have you been doing what He says? It's going to hit all of us at one stage or another. Some of us may be on our way to coming to Jesus and that water hits. What's going to happen to them? Probably going to get washed away on their way. Some people are going to come to Jesus and they're going to hear what they say. But they're going to choose not to and they're going to get washed away. And I believe with all my heart there's some who are going to be in the middle of and the flood may come. Well, the house is the least of their worries at that time, isn't it? But this says they finished the house. Both people finished the house before the floods came. So as I process this more, I'm wondering what he's really talking about. Is he talking about my life? You know, because we said the house is the imagery of a life. Maybe he's talking about our life in heaven. Maybe the house that we're building, the things that we're working on, is where we're going to live in heaven. Because you know this isn't your home right now, right? This is temporary. You're going to live somewhere else. Heaven or hell. And I don't really know if you call living in hell living. And so maybe this life that we're building, these shovelfuls of dirt that we're doing, or the shortcuts that we're taking are all going to affect this eternal home that we're going to. And you know why that makes me even think more? I'm going to just wrap up with this part right here and see if you catch this. What example in this parable that he could have chose anything did Jesus use to convey to this mostly Jewish congregation would come and destroy the house? What? Flood. Did he use water? Did he use fire? Could have been burned up, couldn't it? Did he use a tornado or a hurricane? Did he use a war that destroyed it? What did he use? Why? And in particular, water. He used a torrent of water, but what else did he say? He called it something at the very beginning. What was it? Flood. Now, where have I heard that word flood before? When God destroyed the earth, but who? He didn't destroy everything, did he? Who didn't he destroy? You know what I mean. Ricky's like, well, let me take a drink. I wouldn't know he's paying attention. Who was he talking? Who are we talking about? Noah. Why wasn't Noah and his family swept up in the waters? Because what? He put into practice what he heard that God told him when he came to God and prayed. In his prayer life, he comes to God, he comes to Jesus, would be God at that point, and he hears what he says, and he's like, that's the craziest thing I ever heard, building an ark. But he did what he said. Do you think that he went, you know, it's taken a lot of work. I'm not going to put this much pitch on it like God told me to. No, I don't think he took a shortcut. Well, I'm just not going to build it as big. Do you know how many more logs I'm going to have to pull down here to build it this size? What if I make a scaled down version? No. He came to God, he heard from God, and did exactly what God said when the whole world told him he shouldn't. And what happened to him? The flood waters came, and he lived. So that leaves me with the question for you. Where are you building today? Well, it's not really about where you build. I could say, well, what kind of house are you building? What kind of life are you building? But really, that doesn't matter because they both built a house. They both picked a location. They both wanted to live in that place. But the distinguishing thing was who did what they were told to do. And in the middle of everybody else in the world saying that's wasting your time, you're spending too much time, you're spending too much energy, they're just like, choo, choo. And they keep digging. Choo. And they dig. And then one time, at some point in time, they choo, tick, 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 and they hear that sound of metal on rock. And they dig around that, and they dig around, and you think they get excited then? You think they get excited? You think when they, now they might be a little bit of disappointment if it turns out to be that little 8-foot rock, and it's like, dang it, now I could quit there, and I could stop right there. And I'm going to tell you many people in this church and in this world have stopped right there because I only need a partial foundation. My house is bigger than what that is. I'm tired and I'm wore out. And I'm going to say, many in this room are there. We've spent time digging. We've came and we've listened and we're trying, and it didn't happen as quick as we thought. It wasn't as easy as we thought. We didn't know it would cost us that much. And so we stop. And when the floods come, partial foundation will give away just the same as no foundation. So the question is, to me, is where are you at? Maybe you're still at the top digging. Maybe you hadn't hit your first rock. Maybe you've hit your first rock and you pulled it out and it took even more energy. You had to get friends to come help you and you got it out. That's deep enough. Don't go any deeper. That's deep enough. Don't. And you sweat and you struggle and you pray and you read your Bible and you come to church and you get around people who encourage you and don't discourage you, who tell you and reinforce in you, listen, do you know what? Do you know what the sound of a soloist is like? Isn't it beautiful? Do you know the difference between a soloist and harmony? Like a 3-part harmony. Does anybody know what 3-part harmony is? It's like one singing high, one singing low, and one singing in the middle, and it just makes a different sound that the soloist can't make. See, right now, for many of us, you're digging, and you ain't listening. Because if you listen close enough, you're going to hear over here. And you're going to listen a little bit more, and you're going to hear, and there's other people doing the same thing. Those are the people you need to be listening to. Those are the people you need to be having cups of coffee with on your break. Those are the people you need to be talking about the journey, because the ones that are and the ones that are and the ones that are all doing the same thing. And we got to quit listening to the ones who just stopped up here and build their foundation, who are yelling from their house going, hey, this is so much easier. This is the easy way. You don't have to do everything he says. Or to the one who's built theirs on I'm on a partial foundation. Dude, listen, it hadn't rained for years. But the rain's coming. I don't know how far it is down here, but I ain't stopping. Because I'm not just coming to Jesus. I'm not just listening to Jesus. With all my heart, I'm going to do what he's saying. Because that's how you build a life that lasts to eternity. And isn't that what we want? That's where peace, that's where love, that's where hope, that's where generosity, that's where the embracing love of God is. And I'll close with this. Jesus was asked one day, a pretty wise scholar of that day that knew the Scriptures, what's the most important law in the Bible? All of them, what's the most important thing we should do? Does anybody remember what he said first? Love the Lord your God with soul, mind, and one translation says strength. And the second is like it. Love your as yourself. Let me tell you this. Loving God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and stopping without loving your neighbor is like building on a partial foundation. And you're going to get washed away. Because the question would come when you say, I love the Lord with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength. Why would they throw heart, mind, soul, and strength in there if you didn't have to take some action? And you didn't have to put it in action. So this week, your challenge is, I want you to do this. Write these 3 things down. This is what I want you to do this week. Number 1, I want you to stay the course. If you're digging and you're building your foundation, I want you to keep digging. If you started building your house, lay down the hammer, lay down the nails, and start digging if you're not on the foundation. You understand? You're just wasting time. If you're not confident your foundation is where it needs to be, quit hammering and nailing and pick up a shovel and a pick and dig. That means dig into the Word, which is your second thing. Dig into the Word. Dig into your prayer life. Pray and dig. God, help me. Help me to know. And then the final thing is trust Jesus' words and put them into action. When he says love your neighbor as you love yourself, try that this week. Now, before I close out with a prayer, because this is how we're going to end, we're going to close out prayer today, I want to tell you this. I've asked each of you to write these things down. Some of you took advantage of that and some of you didn't. But in my wallet, I don't have it on me now, but in my wallet, I have a lot of stuff in my wallet. In fact, if you go into my office right now and find my wallet, it is wrapped up with a belt. Because I got a new wallet, and that sucker springs open. Jody, am I lying? It is tied down with a big belt to try to get that thing to stretch the leather because I got so much stuff in there. But it ain't money. I'm just going to go ahead and say that. It's credit cards, debit cards, gift cards, whatever. What's those things you get? Punch cards? Man, I got them like crazy, man. If I got a free meal, I'm getting a free meal anyway. But inside there's little notes. Message notes. Little notes. Not the whole bulletin, but little message notes. to remind me of something. There's one that we gave out one time, a $1 bill, and we put a little gold thing on it that says, you can't serve both God and money. And that $1 bill's in my wallet, so when I open up, I got to remember what I'm using that money for, right? It reminds me. So here's your challenge too. Not only just writing these 3 things down, not knowing the first 3 things of what a disciple is. What does a disciple do? Come to Jesus. He does what? Hears Jesus and puts it into action, right? And then the other 3 things are not just stay the course and keep digging in the Word and keep getting into growing into Christ that way and trust God's Word and put it in action. But here's the thing. You could take this piece of paper and leave it laying where it's at. You could drop it in the garbage can. You could leave it on the floorboard of your car. Or you could just never see it again. Or maybe you could take the moment to take what you've written down and sometime over the next 7 days, read through it again. At least 1 or 2 times. And read through it again. 1 is good. This is one of those things. 2 is better, and 3 is even better than that. But the point is, read through it and see what it looks like if your life is matching up that this week. Because right now is the easy part. Remember, number 1 and number 2, those are the easiest ones. Come to Jesus and hear from Jesus, the easy thing. What's the hard thing to do? Put it in action. And guess what you're going to do when you go through those doors? Put it in action. So that's your challenge this week. I believe you can do that. I believe that each one of you in this room could sacrifice or give up enough time to read through that. It's all in your message notes. The scriptures are in there. You don't need anything else. You can read it from your own Bible if you want to. But all of you have the potential and the capacity to do that if you choose to. And ladies and gentlemen, that's on you. As every choice that you make. Every choice you make is on your shoulders. So you got a choice to make this week. And I believe you can do it. And I believe when you do, your blisters will hurt a little bit less when you're digging. You'll feel a little bit more determined about why I'm digging and why I'm working. And you'll start believing God could make a difference even in you.